Welcome everybody to Rackham Auditorium. We're glad to have you here today. My name is Phil Larson. I coordinate veteran and military services at the University of Michigan, and I'm also a proud Air Force veteran. The university's had a long and deep history of supporting our military students. From our over 100-year commitment to ROTC on this campus, to our recent advances in welcoming and shepherding student veterans through our campus and helping them graduate with the U of M degree, truly becoming leaders in the past. Today, we bring you together to celebrate and to champion Fisher House Michigan through our annual Stories of Service. The University of Michigan is proud to host this year's event. We are proud to welcome you back to the Ann Arbor campus. We've had this before in Hill Auditorium. We're proud to have you here back in Ann Arbor for one of our first events, live events, since the COVID pandemic happened over 20 months ago. Today, Ann Arbor VA and Ann Arbor healthcare system has Michigan's only Fisher House on campus. Thanks to the generosity of many here. Thanks to Ann Arbor private and corporate citizens. Thanks to Brad Chick and Karen Terry, who approached us several years ago and said, we have this great idea to build Fisher House Michigan. We'd like to have an event at Hill Auditorium, and we'd like to do it all, or we'd like to have an event in less than 3 months. They're tenacious people. I think it captured my military soul when they said they wanted to do it, because they were kind of like damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, and I was on board with this. The fundraising began and continued with this event, with Stories of Service, which demonstrated the power of veteran stories to inspire donations at no charge. The high-quality accommodations for the family of our veterans who were hospitalized overnight and for longer. The patient's prognosis is always better when family members are present. But that's not always possible in Ann Arbor, especially around football games when nobody can find a hotel, or if they can find a hotel, it's an extraordinary price. If you have charity in your hearts today and a little bit of dollars from your wallet, please think about donating something to Fisher House Michigan. Especially a lot of folks who are joining us on the webinar too. It's at fisherhousemichigan.org. We're fortunate tonight to have as our MC and Master of Ceremonies, our Master Storyteller, Ray Christian. Ray grew up in urban poverty in the Churchill community of Richmond, Virginia in the 1960s and 70s. He joined the Army 2 weeks out of high school at the age of 17, serving stateside and abroad for 20 years as an infantryman and paratrooper. He was awarded the Master Parachutist Badge, the Combat Infantry Med Badge, and the Broad Star Medal. He has 4 rows of military decorations on his uniform and all, and that matches his 4 university degrees. 3 of them are from graduate schools, so he's a kind of a 4-and-4 person, right? And there's no one like Ray. He's taught African American history and storytelling at Appalachian State University, which we here at Michigan do pretty important. He is an adjunct professor. But there's more to this man and his family man. He also raises animals on his farm. Ray Christian was named the South's best storyteller. He's a 12-time Moth Story Slam champion and winner of the 2016 National Storytelling Festival Story Slam. His stories have been featured in the Moth Radio Hour, Snap Judgment, Backstory Radio, and The Confessions, Spooks, and Rick's podcast. And his own podcast, What's Ray Saying? And we're going to get to hear what Ray says. Ray was recently selected as a Fulbright Specialist Scholar for expertise in education and storytelling narrative. It's a highly competitive award gifted by the U.S. Department of State and their Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs. He is now one of the children's specialists who serves as expert consultant on research curriculum and faculty development in over 140 countries around the world. Tonight, along with all of our other storytellers, we are fortunate to have him here. Please give a warm Michigan welcome to North Carolina's legendary storyteller, Ray Christian.
All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Stories of Service. I bring you greetings from Boone, North Carolina, where the black population is less than 1%. I was in the airport and when I flew into Detroit, and I was telling the guy that I was from Boone, and he looked at me and he said, "Hey, isn't that Boone on television?" There was a black guy sitting at the table. I said, "No, that can't be Boone. I'm right here." Welcome to Stories of Service. What I'd like you to do right now, if you have a phone, I want you to take it out. Take your phone, take the phone out right now. I want you to turn on the flashlight. Take out your phone, turn on the flashlight. So, don't look at me. I want you to look around at the lights that you see. And I want you to imagine these are the angels of our fallen heroes. Now, put them away. At this time, what I'd like to do is salute the armed forces of every veteran. So when I call out the name of your branch of service, if you would, if you're a veteran of that branch of service, we'd like you to stand. First, no. United States Go! The United States Army. The United States Air Force. Not a single U.S. soldier is destroyed by Indian aircraft since World War II. We have the best Air Force. Oh, we did them ones before, right? The United States Marine Corps. Yellow Dogs. From Delaware, the Iwo Jima, the Choson, to the Mekong Delta. United States Marines. United States Coast Guard, saving lives across America's coast for more than 100 years. And the youngest, newest branch of military service, the United States Space Force. Yeah! Do you know what you call members of the Space Force? Do you know what they're officially called? Sailors, Navy sailors, Army soldiers. What do you call people in the Space Force? They have an official title. Guardians. Guardians. Isn't that a great name?
They're heroes, sir.
Perfect. It was our intent, if you look at your program, to have Dr. Phil show up tonight, but he's a little bit under the weather. But we think, we hope, and we pray that you may be watching the program that's being live streamed right now. He's one of Michigan's own. Dr. Phillip was born in Detroit in 1916. That's 2 years before America entered World War I. He attended Central High School and Wayne State University, and later studied medicine at the University of Michigan. After finishing medical school, he joined the U.S. Army Reserves, and he served in the Medical Corps. He served as part of a MASH unit in North Africa during that time, where he was treated, and he was wounded after being strafed by a German Messerschmitt. I want to give you an example of what kind of man this was. Here's an example. Here's one of his stories. A German army officer was injured. He had both of his legs injured. And Dr. Piven and his buddy, another surgeon, they come in and they look at this and they say, "It's likely you will not need your boots. Would you mind if I keep them?" The German officer replied, "Absolutely not." The next day, with surgery being imminent, Dr. Piven's fellow surgeon asks him again, and he tells him the infections have spread. We have to amputate. Would you consider giving me your boots? And once again, the German officer replied, "Absolutely not." The surgeons then turn to Phil and they say, "Given that he's going to need blood for the operation, I wonder if he would mind if we use 2 pints of Jewish blood." The German officer finally agreed to hand over his boots. Let's give a tremendous round of applause to the University of Michigan's oldest living alumnus at 105 years old, Dr. Phil Piven. So I need to tell you, give you a little trigger warning. Some of the stories that you're going to hear tonight involve post-traumatic stress disorder. And I did say that I was from Boone, North Carolina, and I do have some understanding of what it means to be traumatized.
Oh, stop.
Greatest day in college football history. We nearly burned the town of Boone to the ground. Our first storyteller tonight, he's going to shed some light on the difficulties and struggles associated with being medically separated from the service. He's going to tell you what his diagnosis is. Had a chance to speak with him last night. Fine man, Renaissance man, and he's the only active duty military member that's going to be telling you a story tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm round of applause to Staff Sergeant Marshall Eckert.
Evening. In 2016, I graduated from Radford University with a degree in criminal justice and psychology. During my senior year, I felt a call to join the military. I wanted to give back to the country that had given me so much. I was going to do this by commissioning in the United States Air Force. I put my application in, and they didn't want it. So I decided I was going to enlist. It wasn't going to return. But I didn't want to just enlist. I wanted to do it at the highest level. I wanted to go out for special operations. I took the physical testing required, and I was off the basic. Everything was going smooth. I was grinding through, and then one day while working out, I rolled my ankle. At the time we didn't know this, I didn't just roll the ankle. I tore the tendon that connects your foot and leg. Now, I told you I wanted to go out for special operations, right? So I had no good mentality. I wasn't going to let that stop me. I pushed right through basic, and I arrived at special operations training, and the physicality was just too much. I couldn't keep up with the injury. I was washed out. So what do you do with washouts? You give them a new job. They gave me the job of radio frequency technician. Fancy title, right? That's short for guy who fixes radios. This wasn't anything I was interested in. It wasn't what I cared about. I wasn't passionate about it. I really had no excitement for it. But what I was excited about was my first duty station. I was given Aviano Air Base. Now, people will wait their whole careers with it. I got on the first try. Now, I was completely lucky, but I landed. When I arrived at Italy, I started to feel pain running up and down both legs. Now, I'm a lifelong runner. So I knew the effects of compensating for an injury. I know how that can cause pains and aches in other places. So I decided, it's time to get this ankle looked at. It took me 3 years to get that ankle looked at. I'm going to the doctor, they take an x-ray, they say, nothing's broken, you're fine, go home. I fought tooth and nail to get an appointment with a sports medicine doctor. And he just said, great guy, said, it's probably irritated, you irritated the tendon. It's put you through 6 months of really extremely painful shots, and that should fix the problem. Surprise, surprise, it did not. I was finally getting the MRI that I needed. Now, mind you, this was 3 years of walking, working, running, living life on this ankle. By the time we got the results of the MRI, it was not only torn, it was unraveled. This meant I had to have surgery, but I wasn't hurt about that because I thought, all right, I'm gonna get this surgery, my leg is gonna go back to normal. I'm gonna get back to the way things were. After I recovered from surgery, I found the pain in my legs was worse than it was before. This all came to a head one day when I was eating breakfast. I had a shooting pain go across my chest and down my arm. Now, I'm a stubborn man, right? So, no big deal. I'm not worried about it. My wife didn't like that answer, and I found my way to the doctor's again. Now, the doctor reassured me that I was right all along. There's nothing wrong with me. I probably worked out too hard, strained muscle. You're fine. I told him what my wife said. He said, fine. Put her mind and give me an X-ray. Gave me an X-ray, sent me to work, and I sat there miserable all day until I got a phone call saying, Marshall, you need to head to the hospital. Your lung is collapsed. Lung collapsed? Didn't make any sense to me. I told you guys I was an athlete. Cardio was my jam. I love cardio. I don't smoke. Take care of myself. How could I have a flat lung? I thought this had to have something to do, right, with the leg pain. There's got to be some connection there. I brought this up to the doctors. Unfortunately, they took me serious this time. 3 months of going to specialists, getting testing done, we came to the diagnosis of muscular dystrophy. Some of you may think about muscular dystrophy, you might picture children in wheelchairs, or a telefund you saw on TV one time raising money. That is muscular dystrophy, yeah? It's not what I experienced. I experienced my leg muscles deteriorate. The doctors told me estimated about 10 to 15 years after onset of symptoms, I would likely be wheelchair. This is something that makes you ineligible in the military. So after I got this diagnosis, what do they do with people who wash out? Get a new job. So my new job was patient. That meant I got to start the long, tedious process of awaiting a medical evaluation board to tell me if I could stay in the Air Force or not. Now, I said long and tedious. I compare it to stepping into a black corridor. You can't see the end. There's no light there. You're just kind of wandering around in the dark. The timelines are always shifting. You can never get a straight answer from anyone. Some people wait years to get an answer back. Some people months. It's a process that really doesn't make much sense. For me, I was actually a lot more frustrated because they pulled me out of Italy and sent me to Walter Reed Medical Center, which is in Bethesda, Maryland. Now, this was supposed to be the best thing they could do for me. I was going to go see specialists. I was going to get experimental treatments. I was going to have physical and mental therapy. But this was peak COVID time. It was hard enough to get a doctor's appointment with sniffles. When it was all said and done, I saw a couple specialists. I never got any experimental treatments, no therapies. I was experiencing a lot of ups and downs. I wasn't healthy enough to be in the Air Force, the regular Air Force, but I wasn't sick enough to be a patient. A lot of the guys at Walter Reed are having amputated legs. People are dying of cancer. People are really sick. When you looked at me, couldn't see anything. I started to feel like an outsider in a uniform. And this drove me to every single day ask, when will I get my answer? What information do you have for me today? And every single day I was told, you need to be patient. I was being patient. I was waiting as well as I could. But then I started getting confused. I would have my supervisors come to me and say, you could be out tomorrow. You need to get that resume buffed. You need to start applying for work, maybe school. And I was a good airman, so I did just that. And I'd have the same supervisor come back around and say, what are you doing? You're Air Force property. You're not going anywhere. Okay. So I sat in this process and I let it drag on and on. And one day, it came to an end. For me, my timeline was 6 months. they made the decision that I would be medically separated from the Air Force. I was no longer eligible to stay. I summarized this whole process in 4 adjectives. It was scary, because I didn't know what my day-to-day was going to look like. It was chaotic. It was disorienting, and it made me feel trapped. By the time I was given my out, I couldn't wait to go. I was running out the door. But that's sad. So I think back on it, it was something I really wanted to do. I wanted to join the Air Force, and I wanted to leave on my own terms, with my head alive. Instead, I had to watch as the Air Force marched on without me, and I was kicked to the curb. I want everyone to remember that not all hurt and pain is visible. I can't count how many times I've had someone stop me on the street and say, "Why are you limping? Tough leg day?" These aren't meant to be nasty comments, but they're a constant reminder of the life I'm going to live without the proper use of my legs. Now, I've said some negatives about the Air Force, but overall, I want to say it was an amazing experience with amazing people. I did things I never thought I would, lived places I never thought I would go. And I just had so many fun adventures. And I'm thankful that I was able to serve and protect the men and women in this building today. Again, I love my experience and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Thank you guys for coming out and supporting this cause.
Thank you, Marshall. That was a great story. You know, we would be remiss if we didn't spend some time addressing the contribution and service of women in America's armed forces. When I joined the Army, you can never give them enough love. Okay, never. And to illustrate that point, when I joined the Army 42 years ago, I can remember what we were being told and what we heard on the news and the media is that the United States would never accept female casualties in combat. That was 42 years ago. In the last 20 years, more than 400 women have died in combat in 3 sets of sisters. So to our sisters, daughters, and mothers who are not here, let's give them a round of applause. Our next storyteller she's a certified executive chef at the University of Michigan. Because food is love, right? More than appropriate. She is trained as a chef for over 10 years, honing her skills in all facets of the industry, from personal chef to catering, even opening restaurants. She has had the opportunity, the privilege, maybe honor, maybe stress, maybe responsibility of serving in one of the most emotionally stressful and draining military occupational specialties that exist. Serving our fallen heroes. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome to the stage our next speaker, Kristen Anderson.
Well, I think he just told it all, so we're good. First time doing this, so I joined the military in 2002. I don't come from a family of military. I didn't join for any post 9/11 patriotic reasons. I joined basically to get the heck out of Dodge. I was going through a hard time in my life. My parents were going through a divorce, and I have what they call middle child syndrome. Look at me, look at me. I'm number 2 of 4. My parents tried to talk me out of joining. I think they saw the writing on the wall, knowing the political climate the world was in at the time. And I was young and dumb and gung-ho. So I went full force. My recruiter was kind of cute. My best friend was joining, so woo, new adventure. And off to basic training I went. I went with the promise of a job in linguistics and in working as a flight linguist. I get through the first couple weeks of basic training, all's going well. I'm now living and breathing the Air Force core values: integrity first, service before self, excellence in all we do. We go for our appointment to get more information on our jobs and to see if we still are qualified, meet all the requirements of that job. I get my height taken and I'm 5'2" 3/4". Yeah. Gotta be 5'3" to be on flight detail. Unfortunately, I didn't get the height waiver that you're supposed to get before. There's pretty much a waiver for everything in the military, including boots when you get blistered. But I didn't have that. There's a couple options then. The term guaranteed job is a soft guaranteed. As I said, if you don't qualify or meet the requirements when you go in at that time, they reclassify you, they find a better role. The couple options I had were to separate, move on, say la vie, no harm, no foul. I could wait at Lackland Air Force Base in basic training for that height waiver. Any of us who have ever been in the military know that the military doesn't move very fast on certain things. Or I could take a different job, get it reclassified. Luckily, I took college chemistry and I had the job that was just right for me. I was going to go off to Washington, D.C. and learn how to be a histopathologist. Yeah, that's exactly how I felt. Finish up with basic training, fly off to D.C. I'm heading to Walter Reed Army Medical Center, the original one that was still in D.C. at the time. And I was going to train with the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology. Still didn't have a clue what pathology was at the time. We get there, they go over our job. We're basically going to be doing science stuff and processing specimens for the doctors to diagnose. And then they kind of quietly tell us one of the parts of our job was we do autopsies as well. Yeah, they said that very quietly, didn't really get into it. It's a small part of your job, won't happen that often. The thing is that every service member that passes while on active duty has to get an autopsy. They do this for record keeping and many other reasons. And as I said, this time is 2003. My training started in January. We just get into it really in basic anatomy, totally green. And February, March hits and, excuse my French, but shit starts hitting the fan overseas. More and more service members are being killed in action every day. Histopathology is not a very large career field in the military. And they decide best course of action to give the service members that are already up at Dover Air Force Base performing the autopsies a break is to send the trainees. So they cut our training short, load us up, we head off to Dover Air Force Base. I'm sure we've all seen the pictures of the caskets draped with flags in the airplane hangar. We're still working in that same airplane hangar in 2003 that they, excuse me, they converted into a morgue. Sorry. We get in there and it's go time. They go over the details of what the day is gonna look like, how many people are in the queue, and show us where to change, where to go, where not to go, show us where the chaplain's office is, and suit up and get in there and let's get to work. I was assigned with my training supervisor, Petty Officer Barber, and the pathologist we were working with was Dr. Z. We get in there and I'm looking just like I am right now, total deer in headlights, shaking like a leaf. You know, they wheel in our work for the day, and yeah, there's me looking at a dead naked man. The doctor is looking at an x-ray, there's someone talking over here, and everything's kind of going in that slow motion, fast forward thing I can't really explain, and people are talking to me and saying things, and I totally lost. The doctor finally gets my attention and says, Anderson, I need you to look into the guy's mouth and see if you can feel the shrapnel that I'm seeing here on the x-ray. Then I look at him. Okay. Officer Barber says, Anderson, the doctor asked you to do something. Do it. What? You want me to stick my hand where? Sorry. So, being the good little airman that I was, I slowly bring my shaking hand up and I start to put my hands in his mouth, looking for the shrapnel. And I get in there and I'm feeling around on his tongue. And the doctor out of nowhere comes up and smacks the bottom of his jaw. Sick military humor. What Dr. Z was trying to do was break the tension. And he said to me, he's not going to bite you. Can we get to work now? And what he did snapped me out of it. That day, I did 8 autopsies with Dr. Z. The next day, we did about 12. And throughout that month, I did more than I'd like to say. I became Dr. Z's right-hand man, assisted him every time he was up at Dover Air Force Base. He wasn't doing it to dishonor the service member. He was doing it to get me to snap out of it. We had a job to do. Our duty was to give honor to the service members once they came back home. I served out the rest of my enlistment, spent some time overseas, back and forth, came back home, went to college. There was a couple things that I realized way later in life that I learned that day. I learned that I was forever changed. I was no longer the person I was before. The military asks a lot of all of us. One main thing is they're asking people who aren't grown up to do grown-up things. I was never going to have the same life that my friends and family back home did. I grew that day, but I also I became quite lost in life. It took me quite a long time to realize that sorry, despite the commonly held belief amongst vets and everyone, you don't have to have actively served in combat to have PTSD. I carry the burden of serving those who gave their all in their service.
It is not easy to tell stories like that. It's not easy to make yourself vulnerable because you don't know how people will respond to that. It reminds me of the fact that trying to understand the mentality of what soldiers or people who serve in combat are thinking, it's not always clear because the normal rules of humanity and human decency don't always exist in a soldier's mind. These things can be difficult to understand. And it reminds me of a time during the Gulf War. I was on guard duty with another soldier, and we had been bombing Iraqi positions for weeks at this point. And when these planes would drop cluster bombs in the distance, they looked like stars dancing on the horizon from the distance. And I remember saying to my friend, man, it's like some kind of beauty. And he said, yeah, it would be beautiful unless you were the people underneath that. In the following weeks, we pushed forward with our armored advance. We moved on these Iraqi positions. And in moments like that, your humanity can be lost and your humanity can be gained. When we finally pushed on these Iraqi positions, we had the opportunity to see what that beauty was. Hundreds of Iraqi soldiers had been wounded, badly traumatized, suffering from injuries from accidents, burns. Some were crying, some had intestinal worms. And again, it's times like that, the best thing you can come out. But when we would get involved in that and we'd be feeling sorry for them, then we'd take on some small arms fire from some scared soldier, probably in some bunker, don't know what he's doing. We would neutralize him without even thinking about it twice. In combat, action is not always happening in all parts of the sector at the same time. There'll be places where there might be intense combat. There might be other places where nothing is going on at all. And when you have fatigue and people being tired and stressed, these are the moments when the fog of war starts to settle in. And what that is, you don't recognize things you should. You ignore things you should be looking at. You go 2 feet too far, you get yourself killed. You forget to duck and you die. And accidents happen because you're tired and you're slow. It was one of these moments that I was in where there was no action going on in our sector at all. And I had been in the Army for almost 10 years. And I just had this feeling like, I just want to go out in the desert and have myself a little respite. I'm going to relieve myself. 10 years in the Army, I decided to lay my weapon down. I'm just going to walk out in the desert, not play soldier no more. And at a minimum, I can pee. And this is my moment. I walk out in the desert. I'm about to relieve myself. And I notice that the ground in front of me is starting to move and shake. But before I could respond to it, and brain time works a little bit slower when things exciting are going on. All of a sudden, 3 Iraqi soldiers jump up out of this position. They had been covered by burlap sacks with sand over top of them, so I couldn't really see what it was. And there they were. They had me. And in that moment, all I was thinking was, this is how I'm gonna die? I was a career soldier. I exposed myself like this, and this is how it's gonna happen? But within seconds, they put their weapons down. They started to cry. They were grabbing and pawing at my feet. And it was clear they wanted to surrender. I marched them back to my headquarters. The guys got a great laugh out of that. After weeks of fighting, weeks of bombing, armored assault, why in the world did these guys decide to give up when they saw me urinating in front of their position? What kind of weapon is this that the United States military is trying to deploy?
Oh my God. Oh my God.
I love you. I brought him here. He came with me. You gotta bring your own hype man. I appreciate you already. Man, you got me all off track. Wow. You know, I can understand why soldiers continue to fight. And I can understand why soldiers might not want to fight anymore. But to be honest with you, if I had been those Iraqi soldiers and I saw me walking up with no weapon, I would have shot me. And more to the point, if I had my weapon and I walked up on those 3 scared Iraqi soldiers who were trying to surrender, I would have killed them. Because that's what soldiers do. The normal rules of humanity don't exist. What does exist is your desire to live. And I have thought, and I have dreamed, and I have prayed that those 3 men went on to have great and wonderful lives. Thank you. Our next storyteller. I was trying to look through Webster's unabridged dictionary for a word to describe this man. I didn't see it, but it ought to be there, and the term would be badassery. He served with the 9th Infantry Division in the Mekong Delta, Vietnam in 1969. He earned the Combat Infantryman's Badge, the Bronze Star, Army Commendation Medal, and more important, for his future, he returned to Ann Arbor with a binder of news stories that he wrote and that were published around the world. And some people think the military is an inflexible institution without any enterprise, but after being involved in numerous firefights, the Army finally recognized this man's talent. And he was assigned as an Army news correspondent. And when he rotated home, he was succeeded by a good-looking kid from Tennessee named Al Gore. You know, Al Gore was a correspondent. You didn't know that? Now you do. So he served as a journalist, newspaper editor, television station manager. Eventually, he shifted his work to advertising, working for the world's 4 largest agencies as a creative executive. You might have seen some of his work. He was responsible for the Heartbeat of America campaign, for instance. Later on, he revealed his entrepreneurial side and founded his own business, consulting company for over 30 years, got hundreds of clients, made millions of dollars, special man. You're gonna hear an incredible story from an incredible man, Mr. Badassery himself. Phil, come on up here, Phil. Yeah! Let's keep it going all the way to Phil to the stage.
Like high school, I'm completely prepared for this exam, but just in case. Crib notes. Hey, good evening. Oh, yeah. Good evening. My wife and I have remodeled our kitchen and bathroom. We put in our orders before the supply chain choked. So we have new quartz countertops, new sink, new range and refrigerator, new bathroom, basin, tub and shower head, and we have the best new toilet in terms of comfort and operation. It is a Toto, designed by the Japanese and made in Vietnam. I sit in my new Toto and I think about the fact that during World War II, the Japanese and the Vietnamese were mortal enemies. And I think about the war I was in more than 50 years ago. I was assigned to Alpha Company, 6th Battalion, 31st Infantry of the 9th Infantry Division in the Mekong Delta. Our base camp was 3 miles long, 1 mile wide, and supported a paved airstrip for Puff the Magic Dragon, combat planes, cargo planes, every kind of helicopter, multiple self-propelled cannon, the biggest of which were the 175 millimeter that could fire a 147-pound high explosive round with pinpoint precision for 21 miles and then move before any counterfire could hit it. We dug a deep water harbor for Navy warships with their big guns. And in Vietnam, we had hot showers, a swimming pool, an air-conditioned library, all for 15,000 heavily armed men, of whom I was one. For its civic action work, vaccines to check the many illnesses of the Vietnamese in the Mekong Delta, deep clean drinking wells, hospitals, schools, improved roads, Alpha Company had won presidential unit citation. It was awarded posthumously. Alpha Company had done a sweep, took fire from the wood line, went to ground, called in artillery and an airstrike. Then Alpha Company rose as one and assaulted the position. The Viet Cong, who lived in those villages Alpha had been helping, had been studying us carefully. They had fired a volley and then ran back out of range of our bombs and shells. When it ceased, they sprinted forward to occupy the craters as firing holes. Of the 187 men with Alpha that day, only 37 made it out alive. The 9th Infantry Division was part of the most powerful armed force in the world. The Viet Cong deployed in shower shoes and straw hats. They turned our power to their advantage. Think Asian martial arts. They rocketed the giant base camp every night by day. We employed the Vietnamese at high salaries to, quote, win their hearts and minds. They performed work throughout the base. The barber was a Viet Cong colonel who would take a break, light a cigarette, stretch his legs, noting his direction and counting his steps to improve the accuracy of the Viet Cong rockets that were coming that night. But he also gave a great haircut. The women who worked for us were sisters and cousins of the Viet Cong. They knew everything about us. We knew nothing about them. Outside our perimeter, a woman hoed her farm. Every angle we came off that perimeter, there was a woman hoeing her farm. That's how the Viet Cong knew when a patrol left the base on a combat sweep. I came in as a replacement for Alpha Company, and of course, so did most of the other men assigned. So here's the thing. Men, women new to combat will not shoot at the enemy. Most of them will not shoot at the enemy. We had been raised on thou shalt not kill. The Army tried to make us train professional killers. It didn't work. No amount of Army training altered this. In our first firefights, less than 30% of our unit would actually be fighting. Of course, this changed as we were killed or wounded in battle. 6 days a week, I was in a night ambush patrol, wandering around no man's land with 10 others, trying to catch those guys with the rockets. And we never saw them. Every night, we lost 1 to 2 men with booby traps and snipers. I wondered how we would make it through a year of this, but we had learned to be killers. When we deployed on major combat sweeps, our orders were typed and mimeographed. This was before there was Xerox, you had a mimeograph. As good allies, we handed copies to the South Vietnamese Army, the ARVN, some of whom gave copies to their Viet Cong cousins. One day, all of the new Alpha Company deployed. We came off the northeast corner of the perimeter, hiked 1 click, that's a kilometer, hiked 1 click, and our intent was to patrol 3 clicks along a canal. They fired on us when we were in the open. We had no cover. They were really ready. They had heavy machine guns, Soviet-made rocket-propelled grenades and mortars. But we replacements for Alpha were from badass neighborhoods and Ivy League playing fields. We were educated in factories and by college. What had happened is the draft stopped only drafting the poor and the disadvantaged. The draft started getting we college guys. And the upshot was we had one guy that had 3 master's degrees. So we put our heads together. We figured out what happened to the old Alpha Company. And we said, these guys have studied us. They think they know what we're going to do, so we're going to do something else. We're going to do something else. Call us an interdisciplinary team. We were creative. So when we were attacked, we called for napalm on our radio. And then we got in a brief argument with the Air Force on the radio because they didn't understand why we wanted to bomb half a mile behind the enemy position. You don't gots to like it. You just gots to do it. Hey, there's no point in sounding like a college brat, at least not in the Vietnam era military. The Viet Cong fired a volley and ran backwards and straight into our napalm. They spun around, ran back to their line just as we unleashed a massive artillery strike, including the big Navy guns. That was the day we killed the enemy who had killed us. A year later, without ever losing a major battle, the base camp was abandoned. And 3 years later, without ever losing a major battle, we left Vietnam. Now, for 30 years, no one said, thank you for your service. And we didn't bring it up. We didn't speak of it. But something happened. After we got tired of endless war with an adversary that would never quit, the Chinese invaded Vietnam, and the Vietnamese soundly defeated them as we had never been defeated. We needed a buffer to check China, as we once worked with the Vietnamese to check Imperial Japan during World War II. So the irony is, America realized every military, strategic, and economic goal in Vietnam by leaving. Vietnam became the most favored trading partner. The Vietnamese make excellent footwear, clothing, furniture, and electronics. Americans are now retiring to Vietnam. We're very welcome there. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world. It is very affordable, and nobody cooks as well as they do. Their cuisine is just incredible. And so that's what's happening. Now, not to me. I'm retired in Ann Arbor, and I sit on the most comfortable toilet in the world. Made in Vietnam. Yeah, that's all right. I had a stroke. Not a problem. It's easier for me to get out of town this way.
Our next storyteller is he immigrated to the United States in 2009 from Iraq through the Special Immigrant Program for Iraqi Translators. He was granted U.S. citizenship. He received his master's degree in the summer of 2015 in economics, and he now works as an economist for the Department of Commerce. He is my friend. He is my fellow Moth main stage performer. He is a Renaissance man, a polyglot. I love him. Welcome to the stage, Abbas Musa.
After living through the 2003 war and witnessing the statues of Saddam falling all around the country, we hope that the new Iraq will bring us freedom, democracy, and peace. But after the arrival of many terror groups pouring into the country from all around the globe, our lives were forever changed, but we never stopped living. I went through 4 years of college, survived many car bombs and IEDs, and graduated in the midst of the Sunni and Shia civil war. Back then, the possibility or the possibility of me not getting killed or kidnapped was very slim, and I needed to leave. I left Baghdad to go up north in this northern state of Kurdistan, where it was safe. I got a job, and a few months later, my boss asked me if I wanted to run a project on a US military base for them. And I quickly said yes. but I was very nervous about it. Ever since the Abu Ghraib prison scandal happened, the US military as a whole was portrayed as an evil entity in all the Arab media. And of course, that's not fair, but when you hear that almost every day on the news, you become very cautious. And so after I arrived on base, my nervousness kind of went away after a few days. The soldiers were very friendly. They were just people. Some have kids and families that they miss dearly, and others were too young and they just wanted to go home alive, carrying that honor of serving their country. My project was to provide concrete bunkers and put them in the housing areas for the soldiers. They were called pads, and then cover them with sandbags, because these are going to be used as shelters in the event of rocket attack. So I hired about 75 local workers, and I had the main group fill in the sandbags and the location they gave us, and then many smaller groups all around the base in these pads, putting them on the bunkers. And my job is, to make everything run smoothly. I check on all of them every day. I bring them what they need, ice and water and other things. And so one day I was checking on one of the groups, and I arrived to one of the pads, and there was many Army officers outside, and one of them was Major Abel, who I worked for. And he approached my truck and asked me if it's okay not to work in this pad for a few days. I said, sure, let me get my workers. So I drove inside, and once I made the second turn, my workers were sitting against the concrete wall, and a soldier was crying and shouting. And once he saw me, his battle buddy was holding his arms from behind. And once he saw me, he called me a terrorist, other bad names and curses. His eyes were swelling, his face was red. He was broken. My workers later told me they overheard that, they were attacked and one or more soldiers didn't make it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured, that scenario play in my head over and over and over. I just wished if he knew that I was an ally, and I wished if he knew that the intel I provided for my family and my workers have saved many American lives. But I wasn't mad at him. I just hope that, he heals soon. A few weeks later, I was in the dining facility. I usually go in, eat quick, and leave because there's a lot for me to do every day. And a soldier came and sat across from me on the table and said, hey. I said, hey, and continued eating. And then he said, how's it going? I said, it's going good, just another busy day. Continued eating, and then he commented on my food. He liked my dish, and I nodded. And I can tell that he was waiting for the right moment to start a conversation, but I didn't have time to socialize. So once I finished, I looked at him, he's still looking at me, and he smiled. And before I leave, he said, have a good day, brother. I said, thanks, you too. The word brother, I haven't heard that in a while. And it was sweet that he called me that, but why? And I realized that his face looked familiar. And once I started driving, I remembered that this is the guy who lost his battle buddy a few weeks back. And I was mad at myself for not giving him the opportunity to make amends. Not that I needed an apology, but I really wanted him to know that I wasn't mad at him and that I understand where he was coming from, and I'm happy that he was doing better. Few months later, I finished my project, and the unit that was responsible for my project, they offered me a translator position, and I took that. And because of the nature of my units, these units would come for 6 or 8 months, and so this was the second unit that I worked with, and then the third and the fourth have left. And when the fifth arrived, June of 2009, my time on base and in Iraq was near ending. The month after, in mid-July, I received my special immigrant visa. And I immigrated here. And I remember a few weeks after I arrived, I received a letter and I opened it and I looked, it was about military, and then I kept reading, selected service, and I'm like, oh my God, the military selected me to join because of my service as translator. And I got very excited because I have no choice now, I need to join. And then I wasn't really sure, so I Googled it, and it's the selective service card that every American male has one. But then I started thinking about joining because the only American culture that I knew back then was the military culture. And, but it was a hard decision to make because, beside the fact that it's a life-changing event for me, it will put my family in a greater danger because they were still waiting to come, for their paperwork to get through in Baghdad. But finally, in June 2011, I took my oath with the Army National Guard. I then went to basic training and AIT, and I graduated as a distinguished honor grad, but I couldn't walk on the stage to receive my certificate because I was on crutches. 2 months earlier, after I passed my fitness test, I fractured my hip pretty bad, and I needed, to heal, so I used crutches. And after graduation, I had to stay in Fort Lee for 4 or 5 more months to heal. And once the doctor gave me the choice to kind of not using them, even though I wasn't healed, I asked my unit to process me out to go and heal at home, and they did. I went home. I started drilling with my unit in Wisconsin, and I didn't heal until like mid-2013, maybe end of 2013. They took me off all the restrictions except for running, and I still can't run. But luckily, the military have a modified fitness test for that, so I was able to continue servicing and to be promotable. 2 years later, I was promoted to a sergeant, and a year after that, I got my master's degree in economics. And then in early 2016, I moved to DC to work as an economist for the Commerce Department. Then I transferred to the DC National Guard, and the DC Guard, if you don't know, it's one of the most unique National Guard because it's a federal National Guard. And we've done some of the most unique mission for me, and the most memorable one was the inauguration and the Women's March. The first day, I saw thousands of people that came from all over the country. They were all very, very happy to see the president they selected to be inaugurated. And then the very next day, I saw thousands of people pour into the city to protest that president. And they were also very happy. And to me, two groups that are very happy doing the opposite things. And in my head, I was like, this is beautiful. This is what democracy looks like. And this is something I never experienced in Iran. Fast forward to November 2018. After 7.5 years of service, my contract was coming to an end. And I really battled with that decision whether I should stay or leave. But with no run restrictions, I never been able to go to officer school, which was my ultimate goal. And I decided that it was time to move on and see what else I can do. In December 2020, a nonprofit organization called Homes Not Borders reached out to me after they heard about my background, and they offered me a position as a board member with them. Their mission is to help refugees and Afghan asylums to, by fully furnishing their homes before they arrive. So when they arrive, they can find a home, not an empty apartment. And this is one of the messages that I love because I'm helping people that I share a message and share stories and experiences with. This job really didn't take much from me. It's a non-paid job, maybe 10 hours a month, up until August of this year. Once we started, the evacuation started, and once the tragedies unfolded, on live TV, I was watching people that live in my biggest fear. The fear that I had when I was translated is to be left behind, to be hunted and killed. And now I'm watching them, and this started giving me nightmares. And one evening I was playing, fetch ball with Pluto, my 5-pound puppy. And Rachel Maddow's show started, and she was telling a story about a translator who's trying to make his way to the airport. And the way she laid out the story kind of made me believe that he was captured and killed. And then my eyes started, falling down my face. And while still throwing the ball, and in my head, I was like, why? Why me? Why was I so lucky and not them? Why didn't they fix the program for them? And I just, my tears started falling into my lap, and my puppy sensed something was wrong and started jumping, trying to lick my face. And I held him and we sat on the couch, and thankfully there was a happy ending at the end. He made it to the airport. But that's one story, one person. There are thousands of them that are left behind. And, this put me in a depressed, gave me a depression basically. And I started drinking more. I really like to drink. I drink a glass or 2 of wine a week, but now I'm drinking 3 a night, and that's a lot for me. And sometimes more. And every night I sleep at 2 or 3, and then wake up at 8:30 or 9 for work. One night, maybe at 2 o'clock, I was watching science video to get my mind off of it, and I tried, once I decided to go to sleep, I got up, off my chair, and I couldn't get up. I just fell back. And I told myself out loud that I need help. The next day I called my VA doctor, and he put me in contact with a therapist. And, the first call was very short, and it was really just a screening call. Just kind of general questions and stuff like that. And after the phone call, I told myself, if there's anyone out there that can help me, it's me. And so I stopped drinking, and I decided not to watch news as much as I can. And I started volunteering more with Homes Not Borders, because the pressure on the organization was great. The DC area is one of the largest, have the largest Afghan American communities. And so most of them were pouring into our cities, and we were small, we need help. A lot of other board members started to volunteer as well. A lot of my friends, we put on social media, and my friends started donating furnitures and stuff, and I started picking up furniture, dropping off at our storage, went to the local mosque and held a fundraiser after Friday prayer. Others did the same thing with churches. And I then started preparing a storytelling fundraiser show from refugees. And I spent almost all of September coaching the storytellers and preparing for the show. I finished my job, and then I started working up until midnight and every day. And this craziness did not end until September 30th, the day of the show. By then, we raised a huge amount of money. We were able to buy our own truck to move our furniture. We had more than 500 volunteers to help us, move this furniture and set up these apartments. We hired 2 more people, and we're putting together a program to cover the rent for the families that needs it most, so they can get some training and stand on their feet and get better job, And after things kind of slowed down for me, I wasn't experiencing that depression anymore, and no more nightmares. And I was kind of back to normal. I'm back to drinking once a weekend, And then I remember that the therapist said a lot of veterans are experiencing the same thing, and the VA is putting new programs for them to meet the demands. And today I just really wish that every veteran that is experiencing anything like that, PTSD or depression, is to find their way to heal like I did. Thank you.
Beautiful. Well, we're almost at the end, and I hope that you will indulge me by allowing me to tell you one final vulnerable story, if you would. I was unusually sensitive as a kid, and I had a great love for animals. In fact, I'd bring home every lost dog, cat, broken wing pigeon I could find. I thought I was the Dr. Doolittle of the ghetto. And me and animals had a special relationship that we could communicate with one another, that we understood one another. But most of the people in the community didn't see this as a wonderful thing. In fact, people thought I was strange and weird, that my family wasn't raising me right. People called me a punk and a sissy. It didn't take long for me to realize that where I lived in my environment, for men and boys to be taken seriously, you had to be tough. So I put away some of the more sensitive things that I loved and I enjoyed. I played football and I wrestled. I joined the Army right out of high school. I became a paratrooper and an infantryman. And after nearly 20 years of service, multiple deployments, watching people die for noble causes and no damn good reason whatsoever, cracks started to emerge in my personality. Now I'm still on active duty, I'm a senior NCO. My friends, my peers, the people I'm working with, they started saying things to me like, "Hey, Sergeant Christian, you seem kind of nervous, jumpy all the time." Well, I was nervous and I was jumpy all the time. For some unknown reason, I would always feel like this pressure was building up in me. And whenever it happened, I'd be looking around in my environment trying to figure out what caused it, what was pissing me off. And I'd want to yell at it, I want to attack it, I'd want to kill it. Now, right about this time, my sister was living with me. She was on crack, living on the streets. These are her friends, these are her associates, these are the people that she used to fool around with. Came back home from deployment, and it was my habit at the time to collect quarters. I rolled them up, I put them in a shoebox, I put them in a closet on top of the shelf in my room. I did this all the time. Whenever I would come back home, I'd go in the room, go to the closet, look at the shelf, I'd look at my quarters. It was my thing, it was what I did, small thing. I came home, went upstairs, went in that room, went in that closet, looked at the top, and my rolls of quarters were gone. I came back down the steps and I looked at my sister and I said, "Hey, what happened to my rolls of quarters?" In a strange and awkward way, suspicious way, she said to me, "I don't know. Maybe somebody stole them?" Stole them? Who would come in my house, go up the steps, go in the room, go in the closet, go to the top, and take out my quarters? There were a group of her friends, a couple of guys standing on the corner. And I looked at them and I said, "Those guys?" She didn't say a word. I immediately went into the garage. I started looking around and I found a baseball bat. And I quick stepped across the street to those three guys and I drew that baseball bat back and I was gonna bust their heads wide open. And all three of them were just frozen in fear. And just as I was about to strike, my sister comes out of the house and she goes, "No, I lied. I lied. I stole the quarters. I just wanted to get high. I dropped the bat. I walked back across the street. I almost killed a man over a roll of quarters." At some point, days later, weeks later, I'm in the grocery store. And as I'm walking through the aisles, I get the sensation that the aisles are closing in on me. So I got to get out of there. So I'm running through the grocery store and I end up in front of the seafood counter. It's glass and it's got ice. And in my mind, I think I see on that ice a human eye. So I go, hey, there's an eye right there on the ice. The guy looks at me and said, yes, sir. We get fresh fish every day. I go to the mall, I want to get myself together, just sitting down on a bench. The middle-aged lady, she shows up and she's got her very, very elderly mother with her. And they come beside me and she says, Mama, I have to go to the restroom. I'll be right back. Just sit right here. And she leaves. And this elderly woman is just staring at me. I look around, she's just staring at me, focused on me. And at some point, she picks up her fragile, frail, trembling hand, reaches over to me and grabs my hand. And I start to cry. The daughter comes back and she sees this and she says, Mama, what are you doing? You can't just be touching people like that, sir. Are you okay? I said, yeah, I'm okay. Her mother said, it's what he needed. It is what I need. I almost kill a man for a roll of quarters. I think I see a human eye on the ice. I'm delusional. I served in combat. I killed people. And now some old lady is comforting me? What is wrong with me? After some encouragement from my wife, pressure from my chain of command, I made that first long step toward seeing an Army psychiatrist. And it didn't take but a couple of meetings for him to come up with a diagnosis that I was suffering from severe post-traumatic stress disorder with psychotic features. Well, with that diagnosis, I was removed from all my official military duties. So for about a year until I retired, I did absolutely nothing. So I'm retired, I'm raising animals, I got kids, I go back to school, everything seems like it's all right. But the thing is, PTSD never really goes away. It just seems to emerge in different ways and manifest itself differently. In my particular case, it resulted in a stroke. The aftermath of the stroke, the physical symptoms I had is I had left side weakness, I had trouble moving my hands and my fingers, and I have that issue right now. But probably more troubling to me was how I had changed emotionally and psychologically. In the aftermath of the stroke, I started seeing the world differently. It's like I was seeing nuances in the world I hadn't seen before. You know, in The Wizard of Oz, when Dorothy opens that door and it goes from black and white to color, that's what my life was like. For example, I'd see a baby and I just start crying because I go, oh my God, all the potential. Thank you. I'd see a couple looking at each other in the eyes. I'd start to cry and go, oh my God, the world is so cruel with people in love. And it got to the point it was happening all the time. I'd be at a traffic stop, the light would turn green. I'd see my friends, it's good to see you too. But it was getting to be too uncomfortable. So I finally decided to go to the doctor, talk to him about it. What's going on with me now? The doctor says, what you're having is a side effect from the stroke. It's called pseudo-Bopar disorder or emotional incontinence. So the doctor says, listen, I can give you a medication that'll help you with the symptoms if they are bothering you a lot. But before I tell you what I told the doctor, let me tell you this. A couple of days ago, I'm looking at TV. I see this commercial. There's a car flying down the highway. and there are two squirrels in the road. And before the car gets to the squirrel, it dodges them and crashes, and the squirrels are all happy, and they start giving fist bumps and hugging each other. And I'm looking at that, and all of a sudden my chest starts beating hard. I start breathing hard. And I go, oh my God, the friendship, all the nuts they must have shared. So I told the doctor, no thanks. I'm gonna go ahead and keep this one. Thank you. So that brings us to the end. I want to thank you so much for coming out this evening. I want you to check out fisherhousemichigan.org. Make a donation if you think you should. And let's give one more hand of applause to our wonderful storytellers. If I could have them stand and give them one great round of applause. Thank you everyone for coming out tonight. Have a good time.